Greetings, welcome to the Metal Book Tavern, and today I want to talk about books that I am currently reading. I did read a few books throughout January and February, and I will make a separate video on those books. In this video, however, I want to talk about books that I am currently reading. There are 3 of these books, but there might be more of these. Here are all 3 the books. Surprisingly, all 3 of them have blue covers. So let's start with the smallest book in this pile. It's the book that I recently bought, and that's Peter Pan by Ljm Barry. You're probably familiar with the story of the boy who refused to grow up, who lived on an island called Neverland, fought pirates, and had the company of lost boys. So I watched a lot of interpretations of Peter Pan, predominantly the Disney interpretations, and also the Once Upon a Time interpretation. And there was also this film called Finding Neverland. This is the film about Ljm Barry himself, not Peter Pan. And finally, I got my hands on the source material. This is the story that gave us Peter Pan in the first place, and I hate Peter. I was only 2 or 3 chapters in, and I already hated Peter because he came off as a very arrogant kid. Sure, you can say that he acts like this because he's a kid, but he's still a very arrogant one. And very mean too. But nonetheless, I like this story very much. I like this sense of adventure that it has. And also, while reading, I could not forget the Disney film. I mean the 1953 Disney film. Not any of the live-action remakes or interpretations or something. So in most ways, the story is how I remembered it from the Disney film. Also, this character called Tinkerbell. And even in Disney film, I thought she was insufferable and mean, but here in the book, probably she's even worse. But at the same time, this is a good story about imagination, about playing adventures, about exciting places, and so on. I really like it. It's quite easy to read, and it captures imagination. And it's a good book for all ages. The difference is that you have a different interpretation of Peter Pan at different ages. Maybe if I read this book when I was younger, I would have had different interpretation, but now, reading at older age, I interpret Peter Pan differently. Okay, let's move on to the next book. So the next book that I'm reading is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. You know, I wanted to wait till I had all 7 books in my hands to read them all, but I was tired of waiting, and I began reading the first 2, read them, and finally I began reading Prisoner of Azkaban. I have this nice Gandalf bookmark. I like also this edition. It's quite floppy and it opens very well. You know, there are details in this book that I for some reason overlooked. I didn't remember for some reason that Harry had a lot of freedom within Diagon Alley. I didn't remember that for some reason. I also want to discuss the blowing up scene. Well, you read the book and then you think, Harry, you could have been much more patient, but at the same time you realize that the aunt deserved what happened to her. You know, one thing that always surprised me about this book, particularly this one, is how people think that Harry is very fragile. I'll remind you that this guy had fought Basilisk in Chamber of Secrets, and then he also prevented the Philosopher's Stone from being stolen, and also went to the Forbidden Forest twice. He survived a lot, and yet people still think that he's fragile. Also, reading the books in English made me realize how loyal the Harry Potter games were to the books. I absolutely adore that they took the actual lines from the book and added to the game. I adore Lupin's line, "Nobody's hiding Sirius Black under a clothes. Go!" Yeah, the books have a lot of memorable lines that you don't forget, and I wish the films kept most of them, but at least the games did. And finally, I'm reading another rockstar biography. This is Come As You Are by Michael Azerrad. This is Biography of Nirvana. Here are all three guys from Nirvana: Kurt, Chris, and Dave. So the first chapter is dedicated to Kurt himself. It also says a lot about the town that he grew up in, and then he met Chris Novoselic. It also talks a lot about Kurt's parents, his family in general, and it also talks about what bothered the kids of his generation. When I talk about this book, I often repeat that this is the only Nirvana biography that came out while Kurt was still alive. But this edition that I'm holding in my hands also has an afterword by Azerrad, that was added after Kurt's death. So here in this book you also get a lot of events that shaped Kurt both as an artist and as a person, and it's very interesting to read. It's also very interesting to read about what bothered his generation. It's also mentioned that kids from his generation were tired of bands like Genesis and artists like Eric Clapton, and I do kind of feel a little bit sorry for Genesis because I think that Genesis is very good. And I say that as someone who doesn't like progressive rock and metal. But at least the Peter Gabriel albums were quite good. Haven't heard the Phil Collins ones. So Kurt was a very active child, but then he changed after his parents divorced. He became a more moody child, and when his parents divorced, he couldn't live with his mother. He went to live with his father, and they couldn't find a common language. Pardon my Russian mind. In Russian, find a common language means to get along. I stopped at the chapter where Kurt met Chris, and I'm interested to read what's next. I haven't listened to Nirvana in years. Nonetheless, I am interested in their biography, and I'm glad I got this. Before I finish, here's the book that I actually quit, and that's the Mammoth book of Rolling Stones, edited by Sean Egan. Unfortunately, this book isn't for me. I'm not a die-hard The Rolling Stones fan. I do like their songs. They are in my all-time favorite playlist on Spotify, but nonetheless, I'm not a fan of this band. And this book covers the albums of Rolling Stones and what shaped these albums. And there are a lot of interviews. And if you're a die-hard Rolling Stones fan, this is for you. I'm not a die-hard fan. I can say I'm not a fan at all, so this isn't for me, therefore I'm quitting. And this isn't even my book. I took it from someone else, and now I have to return this. Alright, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. What books are you currently reading? Let me know down in the comments. Oh, I'd like to mention that these books I'm reading as for March 15th, 2023. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.